Hi everyone, it's Karyn Bowman from Limestone Township Library District, and today is Tuesday the 12th, and we are going to do a book talk. So, what's a book talk? It's where I tell you about a lot of great books that are out there. And one of the things that I wanted to focus on during this month of January when it gets cold and nasty and you don't only want to stay in is series. This is great because if you're once you get into a series, you really get invested with the characters. You know them, you've been growing up with them, or growing as they emotionally grow, and so you just want to be with them more. And sometimes the characters are just kind of far out and wacky enough that you're like, yeah, this is who I want to be around. So, anyway, um, let's go ahead and start talking about some great series. Now, when it comes to, children's books, I didn't bring any of the picture books with me, but, Kevin Higgins has a great series with the Bruce the Bear. I love that series. You have Pinkalicious, you have Madeline, you have the Pinkalicious and Fancy Nancy, Bob the Builder, Arthur. A lot of great series out there. One of my favorites, actually, for when kids are really starting to read and really connecting with books, is the Biscuit series. And it's really great for sight words, and I know that for my son, one of my boys, it really helped him connect. So that's one. But when you start getting into some of the juvenile books, um, one of the fun ones that we've seen go out a lot lately, in fact, I can't even show you the book. I made a picture, is called The Bad Guys, and it's by Aaron, and I always say his name wrong, so I have to look at it, Labby. And what it is, it's a group of creatures who are considered the bad guys, and they decide that they want to be the good guys, and they form a club to try to become the good guys, and uh, make a better name for themselves. Does it work? Well, it's hard to say, but this is a fun um, graphic novel series for the younger kids, and uh, I think Dave Pilkey even said he wished these books were around when he was a kid. That's a pretty good recommendation. Um, the next book I have in my pile, and I do have a lot, so we'll be going through, is The Boxcar Children by Gertrude Warner. Now, Gertrude has been gone from this world for a while, but she actually started writing these books in the 40s. And one of the interesting things to note about her books is that people would criticize her even back then for having the kids alone by themselves doing things, and she would reply, you know what? Kids are more resilient than you think. Two, they want to see that they can do it by themselves and that they can have these adventures, and an adult doesn't always have to be around. So she continued until the 70s, and then her company, Albert Whitman and Company, the publishing company, has continued on. There's like 157 books in the series right now. So they're for people who want kind of safe but also adventurous, and good writing. The Boxcar Children is a lot of fun. Now, my next book is very popular with kids too. And sometimes teachers and librarians would go, oh no, not Goosebumps. But you know what? Again, it's showing kids being independent, trying to solve a problem. And that's one of the things I do like about Goosebumps, is that there's always a bit of a thread of realism, like this is how this could happen. So it's that's what makes it interesting, and again, it's kids solving the problem on their own. So we have these, you can I swear there's 50, 60, 70. You can really go through a whole bunch, and they're good reading, and see the type, it's not too small, not too big. Now, one of the most popular series ever in its 20-year history is Harry Potter. And this is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, first in the book. I pulled the audiobook because Jim Dale, who is the reader, is excellent. He does all the voices, all the characters, gives them their own full life. But the story, which some people know and some people don't, is about a boy who has been orphaned, living with awful, nasty relatives, who learns that he is indeed a wizard. And he gets taken away to this magical place, to school where he can learn even more about being a wizard, but then he learns more about how his parents died and why he has this scar on his head and the things that he can do. So it's a 7-book series. It does take some time to read. The first couple of books are only this thick, and then the later books are more like that thick. Well worth the read. I always say the first 3-4 books are okay for the younger, like primary preschool, or not preschool, primary grade school and middle school. Then with the last 3 books in the series, that's really more the tweens or middle school and high school, because the subject matter just becomes heavier and denser and we have more deaths. So, you really have to know your child to know, can they emotionally handle that book? And if they can, great. It's a great series. My next book, another book that has been made into a movie and now a TV show with Neil Patrick Harris, and a series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snicket's. Again, about a young set of siblings whose parents have died. It's very tragic. It's very sad. And they find out their closest living relative is this guy who is quite nasty. And so the Baudelaire siblings, within each book, have to figure out their way. How do they get past this guy? How do they ruin him before he ruins them? And there's about 13 books in this series. So if this doesn't keep you all winter, I don't know what will. And my last book is for the teen set. It's a graphic novel. Why? The Last Man. And it's a very interesting premise. And you'll think, wait, was it written today? And actually, the book is set in 2002. So, nearly 20 years ago, and it's about a virus that goes around the world and kills off or sterilizes nearly all of the men except for this guy. He manages to live. So I think there's about 7 books in the series, and it's a graphic novel. So, what I like is that you can get into the series if you have a reluctant reader. This is a way of getting them so that they can understand the story, not only with words, but with facial expressions, and depictions of the picture. Gray tones, kind of sad, brighter tones, not, a little happier, but interesting way of getting the story across. So our staff member Thomas told me about this. I asked him, I'm doing these series, what would you suggest? And he immediately pulled out this one. So there's about 7 or 8 books in this series, well worth your time. Okay, so let's get into the adult portion. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about was some semi-local writers. This first one is written by Denise Swanson, and it is her Scumble River mystery. Her town is kind of a mixture of Wilmington and Coal City. When I read the books, I kind of sort of know where I'm at, but not exactly. I'm not as familiar with that area. But Denise Swanson is a school psychologist, and her character, Sky Dennison, is a school psychologist. But unlike Denise, Sky was one of these brilliant, smart alecky valedictorians of her high school, and in her speech she said, That's it. I'm out of here. I'm leaving you in my dust. Well, now it's many years later, and 12, 13 years later, she's coming home with her tail between her legs because she had a broken romance. Her job was a disaster. So she is now trying to find work as a school psychologist, for which she is trained. And then, as it turns out, mysteries happen around her, and she's pretty good at solving them. So this is a very interesting series. There's about 8, 10 series, and of course, we get to know Sky and her various boyfriends and love interests, and her family members. So great series, and I love it because it's very, very local. Now, another book that I picked out that is not as big of a series, but I still think very worthwhile is, sorry, I'm trying to show her name, the Stuff series by Sharon Pfeiffer. Now, Sharon Pfeiffer is originally from Kankakee. Her parents did own a tavern not too far from, I want to say across the street from Roper. So that's what this part of this book is based on. It's based on that location, but it's set in Kankakee, and some of you will look at it and go, or read it and go, I know that place. I know where they're talking about. I mean, we have Pink's Diner listed in here, and I'm trying to figure out where it's at, and I think I know, but I'm not sure. So you will read things in here, and you'll recognize them very much so. But she has about 7 or 8 books in the series. She hasn't written any more since the mid-teens, which is kind of disappointing because I do enjoy the series. Because of course we go through her. Oh gosh, Jane. Jane is the main character. We see her life as it goes up and down and all the things that she has to do. So, and Jane's occupation is she's a picker. She used to be an ad agency person, and she quit, and she's a picker. She goes to estate sales and is looking for very specific items. Big light is her thing. So, tremendous avenues for different mysteries. And I hope that you give that a try because I think it's fun to read about our own area, even if it's not quite what we remember or think it is. All right, so our next book, I wanted to go into some more historical mysteries and, things that maybe are not so cloak and dagger, but very memorable characters. And this first one is by Amy Stewart. It's called Girl Waits with Gun, and it's about the Kopp sisters, and that's Kopp. Now, Constance is the lead sister in this first book, and she is the oldest, and we are learning her story as well as what happens to the sisters. There's 3. After the rich guy in town plows his car into their horse buggy, wagon, and the threats and real scares that they receive and how they react to it. It's very interesting. It's set in the teens in New Jersey. So back then, what they called Silk Road was it was a very good way for people to make money, or at least the rich people, and then it was a big employer for the rest of the county. But very interesting. I really enjoyed it. They were a fun bunch of women to be around. So I hope that you give this a chance. Every time I've suggested it to somebody, I've never heard a bad review. So my next one, in the more historical sense, is the Maisie Dobbs series by Jacqueline Winspear. And what I like about this is it's set in the late 1920s, and as the series goes on, it does age, so she goes into the early 30s. And Maisie is a consulting detective who is very She's a very practical woman. She's very analytical. So being a detective is actually a, a very good position for her. And she is a woman who has um, had a few lucky breaks in her life. When she was in her early teens, she went to live at a manor house and, was she was in service. Um, and she would sneak down to the library at night and start reading all sorts of books. Well, when she was discovered, instead of getting in trouble, the family decided to help along her education, and she eventually goes to college, and she's a nurse during World War One. When what we find, as I've been reading the series, is that a lot of it is about the effects of World War One, the battles, the infighting within troops. A lot of different things are going on, and we're learning about that. So it's very fascinating. To me, it was fascinating to learn about how all these people um, are dealing with their different injuries. And Maisie was not unscathed with that either. So she has things that she has to deal with. And as the series goes on, and I think there's about 8 or 9 books in the series now, it's just very telling, and she has such a compassionate heart. I really enjoyed that, and that was recommended to me by Steve Moore many years ago, so I really appreciated that, Steve. Um, the next series I'm pulling out is one of the Amish book series. There's a lot of different series out there. Wanda Brunstetter is there, Amy Clipston, Melody Carlson writes some of the Amish novels. Beverly Lewis. I know there's others that I'm forgetting, so I apologize. But this was one that I read, and it's called the Half Stitched Amish Quilting Club. And what it is that this woman, the older Amish woman, is a recent widow, and she decides to offer sewing classes. It's one way of making money. Um, and so what happens is we learn about the lives of the people in her club. We have the tough motorcycle guy. We have a teen who's wanting to learn how to quilt. We have a couple who are trying to rebuild their marriage. So it's a lot of different things going on in this book. A lot of relationships, and somehow Our Lady, whose name is Emma Yoder. Uh, sorry, I went to school with Brethren and Mennonite people, and yeah, that's a very typical name. But Emma somehow helps everybody out, and she might find love on her own as well. So I really enjoyed this. There's 3 books in the series, and it's if you're looking for something a little bit more gentle that doesn't deal with blood and guts, there you are. Now another series that is again about a woman of a certain age is the Miss Julia Speaks Her Mind, Miss Julia series by Anne B. Ross. This has about 14, 15, 19 books in the series. And the first book is about this older woman, or a 50-ish woman, Miss Julia, who has just lost her husband. He had a heart attack in the car in their driveway, and he was gone. He was just gone like that. So she's learning to navigate life because in different ways than you would expect, because she's never written a check. She's never handled the finances. She had her pen money and she did the things that she did, but really their life was kind of, it was separated. Well, lo and behold, she's getting approached by different people for money. And then she finds out that her husband had a girlfriend. And with that girlfriend, he had a son. Something that they never accomplished. They never had children. And so now she's got to get used to this, because one night the woman, the girlfriend comes to her door and says, "He didn't leave me any money. I've got to go learn. I got to go back to school. You need to take care of little Lloyd for me." And that's our jumping point. And then from there on, it's a hoot and a holler. And Miss Julia is just something else. And there's many books in the series, and as we get to know all the different characters, little Lloyd's mother and the housekeepers, and Miss Julia might even get a love interest of her own. You know what? It all works out, but it's a lot of fun, and so I really suggest that one. Now I'm going to get into a bunch of series that are television shows or movies and miniseries um, that people have really enjoyed and really liked and have told me about them. So here's my first one, and you're like, what? A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness? Well, this one is going to get into my to be read pile. Anna from one of our staff members suggested it. She really likes this book because the main character, whose name is Diana, is a librarian, and she is also a descendant of witches. And while in the library, she discovers a manuscript that is about witchcraft and about witches, and it's something she wishes she had never found. She has no interest in it. But what happens is, because she has read it, it has stirred the magical world a little bit, and it's bringing people out who want more information about it, including a vampire. Yeah. So, a lot of fun, kind of thick, 3 books in this series, but very much, very much enjoyed. So I hope that you get a chance to read that. Well, another book that has become a fantastically popular TV series is, I can't say her name right. It's Diana Gabaldon. And it's Outlander. Outlander is the book. And I'm always trying to say Galbadon, and I'm sure that's not right either. But anyway, the story starts off with Claire, who is a nurse who, from the 40s, World War II has just ended, and she and her husband are taking a second honeymoon in Scotland, and they discover a circle of stones. And so at some point, during their walks, they discover it, and they wonder, think about it. Well, she had noticed an interesting plant. She's a nurse and knows about plants and how they might heal you. So she wants to go back. So while he's doing some work on some research, because he's a historian, she goes back to the circle and is looking for this plant. But then something really weird happens, and all of a sudden, she has been transported back into 1743 Scotland, and eventually she will meet Jamie Fraser, who becomes the love of her life. As the series goes on, there'll be time travel back and forth, and there's all sorts of fun, exciting adventures that happen. And so it's been a very exciting series for people, but it is also nice and thick. And the nice thing about this author is she's a historian, a researcher. She has really done her research, and she doesn't like to finish the books until they're completely real, true, to that point, which is very frustrating for some people waiting for the last book. She's been working, this series is, again, 20 years old, and she's been working on this last book for a while, but the series is great. People are really enjoying it. Now, another big TV series that has been going on is Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. And, this is the story of a group of people vying for this throne to be king or queen, and there's several books, and they're nice and thick. And, I can't think of anything better than to have my mug of coffee or tea and to sit back and read. And this, for this time of year, this is perfect. And if you've never gotten into the show, this is a good way of getting to know the characters a little bit more in depth. Even if you have watched the show, I would do that. So my next big series, or at least big book series, because you see it's a very thick book. Um, this is written by Ken Follett, Fall of Graces, and it is a part of the Century Time series. In this particular book, or in this series, Follett follows 5 different families, their ups, their downs, their how they survive the times, and each book will look at 5 different families. So this one is set right before World War I, as things are heating up. Um, so the point is he's trying, all 3 books cover 100 years. So very interesting. I know people who love Ken Follett and will read him every day. Now I want to get into a classic series. And if you are a big movie fan, you know this one. It is Fellowship of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. Tolkien. I know that our library director loves this series. I know a lot of people who love this series, and it's fantastic. It's an allegory. It's a discovery of self. It's a test of friendships, and going what is meaningful to you and what is not. But and as you know, it's the story of Frodo as no wait. I'm sorry. I'm confusing. I'm thinking of Bilbo Baggins, and I'm confusing. But his nephew, Bilbo Baggins' nephew, is looking for the ring, or to return the ring to where it belongs. So there's many treacheries because this ring is dangerous, and it changes people, causes them to do things. It's the my precious. So it's very interesting. It's 3 books of exciting adventures through Middle Earth, and I can't think of a better way to spend your time. Now I'm going to do another series that is very classic. I think this series has been around for 40 years, and that is V.C. Andrews' Flowers in the Attic. Now, I don't necessarily like all of her books. These are very gothic in their storytelling. There's characters that you go, are you kidding me? You would do that? So, but it's a page turning reads that'll keep you up all night. Now, since the original author has passed away, the family has allowed other people to write more books in the series, and so you have other tales of different characters. Maybe they've touched on the original characters, maybe they're within that same town, but I find those a little bit more interesting and compelling. And so if you are looking for a series that spans many years and different families, that certain Flowers in the Attic by V.C. Andrews is certainly there. Now I wanted to go with a couple more. I have this one by Stuart Woods, and you're like, Stuart Woods? Who is he? Well, there he is. I'm trying to do that without much glare. Anyway, Stuart Woods has been writing the Stone Barrington character for years. In fact, he has some 50 odd books in the series. So if you're looking for a series that you're going to stick around with for a long time, this might be your character. But Stone Barrington is a former police officer, detective, who became a lawyer, and he is the kind of lawyer who handles those sticky cases that maybe other people just wouldn't take, that normal law firms wouldn't take. But he's really, really good at it, and he's a very handsome man. He's a charmer. He's a ladies' man. So, we really get into this feeling of, not necessarily happy-go-lucky, but, he's that guy. He's that guy, and he's the guy you want on your side. So Um, like I said, there's 50 some odd books in that series, so if you can't find something there, I don't know. Um, Another series that is very popular, that I like, because it can be hard-boiled and it can be rough and violent, but it can also be a lot of fun, is Janet Ivanovich's Stephanie Plum series. This is the first book, One for the Money, and we are learning about Stephanie, who has been through a divorce, um, and has just lost her job, and so she's a little upset. But then she gets her cousin to hire her on as a bounty hunter. So I found that the series is very interesting because Stephanie is a kind of confused. She's a complex character and she's a very simple person. She wants to be an adult. She wants to live on her own, but she really relies on her parents and her grandma as her support system. She has two love interests, and we spend a lot of time going back and forth between them. But I really find that all 27 books have been worth my time, if not to make me laugh, then to just enjoy the ride while things blow up. And the other thing is, you always want to see, how is Stephanie going to ruin a car today? And she has access to some pretty high-end cars. Now, for those of you who like Cloak and Dagger, it was an assassin thrown in. The Gabriel Allon series by Daniel Silva is just one of my favorites. Gabriel Allon is a former Israeli assassin. He took part in a pretty big operation, and after that, at some point, his family, I don't think I'm giving away anything, his family is killed or severely maimed by an accident. Um, but so he's decided to get out of the spy game, get out of the assassin business. He doesn't want anything to do with it. But about 10 years later, he has a former boss try to come and get him back in, and eventually they do. So then the series is just, every single book is a new adventure, and it's always on an international level. A lot of it takes place in the Middle East. Some of it takes place in Russia, England, France, all over Europe, and some in the United States as well. And it's a series that I have really, really enjoyed, and that's what I would suggest, because it's kind of nice to do something, that's, if you're looking to do something a little outside your comfort zone, that's kind of an interesting way to do it. Now the last book, I promise this is the last book, The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes. And the original, by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, was serialized. It's a number of short stories, and we know it from The Hounds of the Baskerville, and a Study of Scarlet. So a whole bunch of different stories that Sir Arthur first wrote. But did you think, I never imagined that other authors would take on his stories and maybe change things up, do different things. By Laurie R. King is the Mary Russell dash Sherlock Holmes series, in which she's a protege of his in the teens, in the 19 teens, and eventually they get married, and that's part of the series, and it goes through the 20s right now. So very interesting, a different take on Sherlock. Another series by Sherry Thomas is the Lady Sherlock series, and I've been reading that, been very interested in it, and it's set in the Victorian times, but instead of Sherlock, it seems that Sherlock is actually a front for Charlotte Holmes, who is a brilliant, brilliant woman with terrible social skills, who has to she had to teach herself how to be able to make chit chat, because she doesn't really like it, and she really loves food, but she doesn't, she doesn't want to get fat either. So that's a very interesting series. 5 books in it right now. I'm looking forward to getting the 4th and 5th one because I'm not up to those yet. And then another Sherlock Holmes series that I find very interesting. I've read the first book, um, but this one is about the descendants of Sherlock and Dr. Watson, of Holmes and Watson. So the okay, the like great niece of Sherlock is a student in an American boarding school, and for whatever reasons, um, um, the great grandson of Dr. Watson has been offered a scholarship to this very same school. So he's like, I don't want to leave my friends in London. I love London. But his mother's like, no, you're going to take this. You're going to do this. So he goes, and soon enough, he learns that Charlotte is on campus, and and before you know it, there they are together trying to solve a mystery. And just like her great uncle, she is cool headed, constantly doing experiments in secret places and working to solve a very complicated mystery and breaking it down into its parts. So when I was listening to it, I really enjoyed it. Um, and my daughter said to me, she heard parts of it. She's like, you know, this sounds like fan fiction, but on the other hand, it's really good fan fiction. So it's something different to think about because we see series like this, like Agatha Christie. Even though she purposely killed off her characters, other people have written um, her characters, Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot. They have written them in new series. Uh, and I do believe one of those people is Sophie Hannah, who received the permission of her family. I'm sorry, I've got to stretch out my leg. So it's interesting to go out there and find new series. And if you're looking for, maybe whatever I've talked about doesn't flip your trigger, you're not interested, or you're thinking, well, but there's always a James Patterson, and there always is. He's a good writer. You can really read his books quickly, but they're still very intense. The Michael Bennett series, the Alex Cross series, the Women's Murder Club series. And if you're thinking, but I want more, I want something a little different, maybe more like women's fiction. Well, Tracy Peterson has some great series going. She has a lot of series. Karen Kingsbury has the Baxter Family series and a number of those. So there's other series, but a website that I'm going to recommend to you is called Fantastic Fiction, fantasticfiction.com. I look at it all the time when I'm trying to find books for people, or if they said, I read the first book in the Maisie Dobbs. What comes next? I go there and look because I can find the series and I can find them in order. Very important. And I can find out if I scroll to the bottom of the page, I can see what that author recommends or other authors who are similar. So if I'm looking for a James Patterson like book, I can scroll down and I can find something that tells me a little bit more information. So, but also I would say, if you're looking for something new and different, feel free to call the library. Call the library. Why? Because, with all of us different people, there's 10 of us here who work. You're going to get 10 different answers if you say, oh, I'm looking for a new series. Do you have anything you can recommend? Because chances are somebody has something to recommend, and it'll be different from what somebody else reads because maybe some of us like historical fiction, some people like science fiction, other people are looking at more women's fiction or Christian fiction. So you will get different answers, and if we can't find exactly what you're looking for, we will, if we don't know it off the top of our heads, we do know how to look, and that's the important thing too. So I hope you enjoyed this. I know I gave you a ton of books. I'll be putting up a list later, if not tonight, then tomorrow, of the books that I talked about. And I'm so glad that you could join us. And also, important thing, if you have a suggestion for a series that you think everybody needs to know about, type it in the comments. Give the name of the series and the author, and that way other people can find out about something that you think is great, because we all want to know what is the new great thing, what is everybody else reading. So share it with us and let us know. And again, if you ever have any questions, feel free to call us. Our number is 815-939-1696. And anyway, thank you for spending a little bit of time with me to learn about some new books, or new to you books. Maybe you haven't seen this before, or you haven't seen this one before, and you're like, I've never really gotten into that series. I've seen it, but I've never read it. Maybe this is your time. Now that it's colder and we don't want to go out, you have time to read and have a hot cup of cocoa. Anyway, have a great day. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.